Hi people, this is me Ivan Verstyuk, and today I'm going to do an update on the economic situation in Ukraine, which is going through the war that started on February 24th, and we've had like 160 days of the war that put us basically to the edge. Now we're in the edge of crisis, and not much we can do to resolve the crisis, uh, since things in the economy are going into the wrong direction, and lots of instability, insecurity, unpredictability, unsustainability, and such. So let me give you three figures for you to get a grasp of how bad things are in Ukraine economically. The GDP contraction is going to be at rate of 33% this year, which is a lot, and which is probably the biggest GDP contraction in Europe in this century. None of the countries in Europe had such a severe economic crisis for the past 25 years. And when we survived the 2008 financial crisis, when we went through the euro area debt crisis in 2010, 2013, things weren't as bad back then as they are now here in Ukraine. Now, the second figure is the inflation that we're having. It's going to exceed 30% this year. Things are getting costlier each day. And what we do is we don't buy anything outside the very basic list of essentials. So we just buy food, we pay for the utility services we use, like electricity, running water, internet, mobile connection, and that's it. And the third figure that I'm going to give you is the unemployment rate. There are several estimates, all are within the range of 35-50%. And I'll explain what's going on with the labor market. So far, many people lost their jobs. Millions of Ukrainians lost their jobs, and many of us are now into this temporary employment schemes, or half-employed people who we are. And that's painful, and because we have our families, we have our financial liabilities that we have to serve. We need to meet our ends in order to obtain some sort of normality that would allow us and our families to live through the challenges of the ongoing war. And Russia, as we see now, has been doing preparations before the invasion to hit Ukraine's economy really hard. We all turned out to be unprepared for the economic crisis. Well, you can't really do much to prepare yourself for the war, especially if it comes unexpected. But mobilizing the army is just one thing, one part of the war equation. The second part is how you run the economy. Well, the Ukrainian government tries to be helpful. You still can get some social subsidies, and there is state-run employment fund where you can, well, at least get a job as a janitor or as a street worker to take care of how the streets look in Ukrainian cities. But those are low-paid jobs, and they're temporary. They won't allow you to have a normality, at least some sort of wartime normality in your life, and your family will be short on funds, and you'll still have to look for another job. That's what happens all the time. You get some sort of occupation, it pays bad, and then you start looking for another job and you can't find it. Well, people still offer something to you, like your friends and your community, but those are mostly not jobs, but rather volunteer projects and occupations. And since we've had almost 6 months of the war, not many of us can do just volunteering all the time, because we need to be earning some money now. Otherwise, in a month, we'll have zeros in our banking accounts, and we won't be even able to buy the essentials, which is unsustainable. For me, what I did is, when I still had sources of income, I bought myself food reserve. I have 2 refrigerators in my house. Both are full with food that will be able to provide me with nutrition for 3 more months. That's like my guarantee that I will be able to live 3 more months without going hungry. Well, obviously, I mean, I'm an optimistic person who has hope that things will eventually start getting better. I am not scared of like poverty or financial insecurity. I'm sure there is whole lots of things I can do to earn money, and that's what I recommend to other Ukrainians. Just place your hope in your best skills. Place your hope within the Ukrainian society that is mobilized by the war. Another thing about the Ukrainian society and how it behaves under current economic circumstances, which are complicated and which do not allow you to have a feeling of the financial security. 100 years ago, when Ukraine was fighting for the independence from the Russian Empire, that was in 1917, 1922, the similar situation occurred. While the armies were fighting for who's going to win the war, the Ukrainian army was fighting against the Russian army, even several Russian armies. The problem was that back then Ukrainian government didn't care much about the economic situation in the country. So people were losing jobs, people were going poor, and the government didn't do much about this. Governments kept on spending money on the armies, since like the battlefields were the priority, which is understandable completely. The same thing we have now, and this is understandable again. But people need jobs, people need money, people need food, people need comfort of life that they're used to, that they want to have. The longer the war takes, the weaker are financial reserves that people have. Many Ukrainians are run out of money now, and they're desperate. They want to still live the life that is somewhat comfortable. 100 years ago, the instability in the Ukrainian society was induced by this economic crisis, and then just people refused to do the right thing because the situation was so bad. So the thinking of the average person went, well, why would I do the right thing if things are so horrible everywhere? I'm gonna do just whatever I want to. I'm not going to be cooperative, I'm not going to be creative, I'm not going to be helpful, I can't rely on anything, so why would I allow anyone to rely on me? That's a very wrong logic. That was like the 50% of the reason why Ukraine lost its fight for independence 100 years ago. And now we're kind of making the same mistake. I'm not going to criticize the government for prioritizing the defensive needs, the defensive spending. That's normal and necessary thing to do, to spend as much as you can on the armed forces, on the defense ministry, and on the defense procurement. But on the other hand, we already need to start thinking about the economy more, to reshuffle it, to restructure it. Of course, there is resistance. There is a group of oligarchs and like business circles that are trying to capitalize on what's happening in Ukraine. You still can earn money using the crisis that is developing in Ukraine in a negative way. So these oligarchs and these business people with large amounts of capital, they trying to keep Ukraine what it used to be. They don't want any major changes because they feel like they're going to be victims of any major economic reforms and political reforms. They want to keep their influence on how business and economy is run in this country. They want to pull strings the way they used to do it before the war. And they control the substantial part of the economy. That's the private sector. I mean, without the involvement of the private sector in resolving the crisis and the resolving the problematic situation, the labor market, market, we can't do much. The private sector seems to be quite chaotic. I mean, we used to believe that it was strong, but the war showed that the private sector in Ukraine is not as strong. It's very chaotic, and it's very, I'd say, egoistic. The private sector prioritizes the balance sheet over the people's lives. They cut salaries, they've introduced this very harsh austerity regime which affects the Ukrainian economy in the negative way, and I believe it shouldn't have been done in the first place. And now with this austerity, which has been artificially induced by the CEOs of big private companies, we're all in a much worse economic environment than we're used to, because for the Ukrainian economy, the consumer demand was standing at a level of 80-85% of the GDP. And now with this austerity regime introduced by private sector, people don't have money to spend and to get the economy running. So this is the pain that we're experiencing. You know how the economy works. You earn money, you spend money. You earn money, you spend money. Now we don't earn anything and we don't spend anything. This way the economy is not going to work. And Ukrainian economy, as I've said, is hard on the consumer spending. It's heavy on the consumer spending. You can't get GDP back into the positive trajectory without investing in people, without investing in the consumer market and in the consumer demand. You can't build a big manufacturing industry from scratch in 3 months, but you can do something to let people have more money. And that's the problem we're having in Ukraine. People refuse to have long-term thinking. People still behave like they're only pursuing their own capitalistic interests, and that makes us poor each day. And then the inflation, the businesses keep rising prices, producing various reasons, and media spreads those messages that business has to rise the prices. That I'm not sure whether it's the right thing, because the demand curve is going down and the supply curve is going up. So now the gap between the supply and demand is so great that for instance, if my phone gets broken, I'm not going to be able to buy a new one. If my laptop gets broken, I'm not going to be able to do a repair because I don't have money for that. And at this stage of crisis, that becomes dangerous, because if the people feel poor, they're not going to be as supportive, and the societal solidarity is going to be ruined. There was a very good saying by this one U.S. general who once said that the best protection for the country for any outside risks is strong and rich economy. If we'd be rich, Russia wouldn't have invaded in the first place. All the circumstances that we had before the war, they wouldn't allow us to become richer. The inflation rate was exactly matching the wage growth. That's what businesses did. They checked the wage growth in the official statistics, and then they brought up the prices exactly to match the wage growth. And that's how we had the very special sort of inflation that was hitting us hard and keeps hitting us. Ukrainian business hasn't been very ethical, and while in the West there was like this discussion between the shareholder capitalism and stakeholder capitalism. So for you to understand, Ukrainian's business is completely on the side of shareholder capitalism, where maximizing the profits is the only priority that all the businesses share. No one really wants to accept the stakeholder capitalism, the sustainable way of doing business, the environmental and sustainability goals that the United Nations is promoting and talking through on all the platforms that the UN people have speeches on. The things can't be like this anymore. We need to change this country. Of course, war affects us, and to me, I do treat this what's happening personal to me in my life while I'll get shortened funds. This is I talk a lot, comment on the war, and trying to point how the country, how Ukraine should be changing. So the economy is trying to punish me Like, Ivan, you talk too much, you criticize too much the way things used to be in Ukraine. That's why you're not gonna have a job. You're gonna be poor. You're gonna be short on funds, and finally, you won't be able to survive the war the way you would like to. That's type of economic laws that work in Ukraine, like very primitive social Darwinism, very primitive Soviet post-Soviet capitalism. And we need to solve this. We need the government to intervene and let things happening and developing in a positive way. We want to live a normal life. We want to win the war. We want our families to be happy and rich. We want to have jobs that would provide us with earnings and with feeling of that we are needed for this country, for this nation, for this economy, and for this society. That's how things are. We are going through a severe crisis that is affecting us hard. Please be helpful for our country, for the Ukrainians. We are strong, we are reliable partners in all the business ventures that we get involved to, but make sure this is not going to be too long term, because help is needed now. The economy is in deep crisis. Nevertheless, I remain optimistic. I'm sure we will win this war, and we will fight back the Russian invaders, and we're going to have rich and powerful Ukraine, which is going to be good partner for our Western allies. Glory to Ukraine.